Hey YouTube, welcome back. In today's video, I would like to talk about the big difference between a temper tantrum and a meltdown because they look very similar to the untrained eye. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to ask you to please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. I've posted a few videos so far, and I hesitate to post this one, but you know what? I want to be real. And as I start, this channel's a baby YouTube channel, and as we get going, I just feel like it's really time to get down to business. So let's get started. I've mentioned in some of my previous videos about the dreaded autistic meltdown that I can have when I get overwhelmed, frustrated, and I panic with figuring out computers and or putting things together that comes in pieces. But I've never defined until now what a meltdown actually is for me. So I'd like to give a piece of information that people need to know about and be aware of, because not everything that looks like a temper tantrum is actually a temper tantrum. When I panic and or get overwhelmed with the problem, or especially when several problems stack up on each other at the same time, sometimes I start shouting, stomping my feet, crying, and flailing my arms around in the air. I've even thrown food and other items across the room. Yes, I admitted to crying. It happens, and I want to be real with everybody on this channel. Autism has been romanticized in popular culture, but it's not all good, and I really have struggles. Many autistic people struggle quite heavily, and I want this YouTube channel again to document that for education and understanding purposes as I share my life story with the world. I want to be real. When I was younger, I would punch myself in the face and head when I was overwhelmed, frustrated, and having a meltdown. One time it was so bad that I actually lied and I told my mom that I was in a fight because she didn't know that I was hitting myself, and we had no idea that I was autistic. Most people wouldn't notice today, but if you look really close, you can see some scar tissue that has formed high up on my cheekbones where I would most commonly hit myself. Some children go through what they call the terrible twos, but I went through my terrible 20s. Thankfully, I stopped punching myself in the face and head after detaching both of my retinas when I was in my early 20s. That hurt really bad, and I paid dearly for it, and I continue to pay for it to this day. Well, the very kind surgeon, I'll never forget this man. His name is Dr. Schluter. He did an amazing job at fixing both of my eyes with scleral buckles, but I'm absolutely dependent on my eyeglasses from the time I get up in the morning until the time I go to bed. I can't even read an ingredient label on a jar without my glasses on because it's so blurry. I see great with my glasses on, though. I also have a standing appointment at the eye doctor's office, and I nearly went blind a few years ago after a vitreous liquid hemorrhage. Actually, I was blind for a few days in one eye. It was like looking through a glass filled with milk. All I could see was milky white light and silhouettes. Well, now, because of this, my eye gears work a little bit different now, and I have a lot of floaters and bubbles in my vision, but I can see with my glasses on. Also, I need to keep my eyeballs straight as they start feeling like they're bouncing around when I look to the side, or especially when I'm bending down in an awkward position while turning my eyes to the side. It's very disoriented. It's very disorienting when working on something when I'm not sitting or standing with my eyeballs pointed straight. Well, I guess I'll never be a plumber, as I would have to move my eyes while laying down on the floor in awkward positions. A meltdown is actually emotional dysregulation. I have never become physically abusive, but I can say things that I absolutely do not mean. And I feel really bad about it when it happens, and people can get very mad at me because it's misunderstood. I always end up apologizing later once I recover from the very stressful situation. I've gotten much better at controlling it, but sometimes it can and does still happen from time to time. I also really try to mask it when I'm in public because it's embarrassing to me and I don't want to scare anybody either. Unfortunately, my mom, who loves me more than anything in the whole wide world, has to see that. Oh, I'm Mr. Polite to everybody, but my poor mom has to see all the shit when we get home. Autism moms rule. I love my mom so very much, and I really try, and I'm making progress. Most of my days are good, but there are some bad days mixed in there. Some uninformed people can respond quite aggressively in response to somebody having a meltdown because they misunderstand it and think that it's a temper tantrum. So I need to be very careful that a real fight doesn't happen. There's just something about an upset person that makes people chastise them in a way that makes it worse by shaming the person who is having a meltdown. Well, that's not a good recipe for anybody who's involved, but there's always one or two people that end up escalating a situation needlessly with their lack of understanding on display in public. This is a very common issue for autistic people, which is why people need training to be aware of this. I know that it's popular in autism circles right now to say autism acceptance instead of autism awareness, but we can't fully move on to autism acceptance until there's more autism awareness because awareness is where it starts. It's a foundation. We have a lot more work to do in this area. I know that for me, sometimes I'll have a big reaction to a minor inconvenience and maybe a small reaction to a much bigger problem. That's the emotional dysregulation. Again, I always like to distinguish the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown because they look very similar to the untrained eye, but are actually very different. A meltdown it's sensory overload. The person is overwhelmed, kind of like flipping a circuit breaker from fear and frustration. We have to release the pressure from stress, kind of like a volcano when it burps or erupts. A tantrum, on the other hand, is an attention-seeking manipulative outburst in an attempt to get one's way. So as you can see, there's a big, huge difference between the two, even though they look similar to the untrained eye. I've even seen autism websites and mental health professionals fail to make the distinction between a temper tantrum and a meltdown. This is why it's so important for people to be aware of autism because autistic people can be prone to meltdowns. I absolutely hate that when it happens and I feel really bad afterwards and many people misunderstand what's actually happening to me when I have a meltdown. A meltdown is not something to be punished or chastised for as it's not manipulative. It's overwhelm and it's very extremely stressful to us as autistic people. It can take a while to recover from it too after it happens. Well, some people actually can end up escalating a situation by thinking we're being an entitled Karen and telling us to calm down. Let me also add, and this goes for autistic people and neurotypical people alike. Please, please, never tell an upset person to calm down. That has very rarely worked, and it usually will not work. In fact, telling an upset person to calm down is like pouring fuel on a fire and actually ends up escalating the situation rather than de-escalating the situation. That's the golden rule of de-escalation 101 and is supposed to be in professional first responders training. along with many other professions. Yet, what do I see nearly every time? Yep, you guessed it. They tell an upset person to, "Hey, calm down!" This makes me cringe every time, and it makes the problem worse in most cases. When a person is upset, we want to try and at least make them feel understood, even if they can't have their way or there's no immediate solution to their problem. It can also be helpful to try and find out what the problem is and offer help rather than getting mad at the upset person. A simple, "I understand that's frustrating. I'd be upset too. Let me help you think this through," works much better than saying, "Hey, calm down!" Thank you for watching my Neurodiverse Life. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Oh, and thank you for watching all the way until the end. It really helps to get this message out to others as it shows the almighty algorithm that people are interested. Have a great day. You rock, and don't let anybody tell you different. Hope to see you in the next video.